Today's episode is brought to you by HP Poly, where premium audio and video meet hybrid work. From headsets to video bars, HP Poly keeps your team connected, clear, and collaborative. Learn more at cdw.ca/poly.
Hello and welcome to the CDW Canada Tech Talks podcast. I'm your host, KJ Burke, Field CTO for Hybrid Infrastructure. Today, we're going to have a little bit of a different format. One of the things we do towards the end of the year at CDW is we start to look at like technology trends and what's happening and what we've learned through 2025 in this case, and what we are going to learn and do better in 2026, and looking at 2025 and some of the technology trends that we predicted, and doing a bit of a scorecard, and then looking at 2026 and sort of looking into the crystal ball and prognosticating about, well, what is 2026 going to bring us, and how is it going to change our lives and what we do in the technology industry. So I'm going to go ahead and break down some of the trends that we predicted going into 2025, how some of the conversations with customers and our clients and our partners, and internally some of the conversations that we had, and with our US and our global teams, and kind of what's changed and evolved during the year. And then talk a little bit about 2026 and some of the things that we're predicting are going to be at the cutting edge and driving change for our jobs here going into 2026. So first of all, when we look at 2025, key technology trends that we were talking about going into 2025 was the maturing of AI, and really how organizations are going to get past chatbots. We're talking about data as a product, talking to organizations about how to better use their data, view their data in a different way, treat data, really like an asset within your organization, and then working with it in that manner. Innovation at the edge, seeing a lot more from physical innovation when we look at how organizations are doing things like smart retail or manufacturing, and energy production, etc. Managing cross-cloud, organizations looking at the way that they have deployed their workloads and their IT assets, and really, how are they managing those, and are they managing those in silos, and is their strategy, unwillingly or unbeknownst to them, is their strategy sort of driving these management into different pockets. Building business resiliency, going past just a disaster recovery and business continuity, and then automating the skills gap. So those were some of the areas going into 2025 that really felt strongly that organizations should be looking into. CDW Canada, we were looking at how we can optimize what we're doing to drive services and solutions for customers in those spaces as well. So take a second just to break down each of those in a little bit more detail. So the first one, maturing AI capabilities. I've been telling people all year long, nobody gets a gold star for having AI in their list of technology trends. We all, I think, felt very strongly it was going to be a part of what we were doing, whether we wanted it to be part of it or not. It was kind of unavoidable. Throughout most of the year, we joked with people, how long could we go through a meeting without AI coming up? And just because it was so ubiquitous with the conversation around technology and digital transformation, and how we're going to change the way that we do our jobs, and change the way that we get work done. But really the focus was around organizations maturing what they're doing with AI. And so, as the year progressed, we saw more and more organizations moving past chatbots. Organizations, were focused initially around predictive and generative models. I started having more conversations around, in some ways, traditional means of AI, like computer vision or language processing. And so, just because we were having AI conversations, not all of those were generative AI conversations. So that was something that I think surprised some people. The attention to AI created this opportunity to dust off some of the older ideas that organizations had around how to better transform their business. But when we look at AI in the enterprise, and even with generative AI, how things matured throughout the year, really getting into agentic AI that is empowered to make changes. AI that is sometimes AI processes that are being kicked off not by people but by events happening. And then also organizations allowing AI to action certain things. Internally, what we saw here at CDW was the really using more innovative agents from a service desk perspective, coworker services, HR, benefits and policies and things like that. Seeing a lot around, deep research assistance, seeing, AI tools developed internally or provided internally to help with, training plans. Hey, I want to skill up on this. How do I build a training plan for that? And then having, AI really sort of build that unique to you, approach. We saw, some of our sales team, we saw some of our solutions architects and our pre-sales team look at, how do I leverage tools like Copilot to, in the moment, provide me the most up-to-date information about my customers or up-to-date information about a project that I'm presenting on. So we saw more AI capabilities being embedded in our day to day. But then we also saw this moving past chatbots, looking at how do we do business process automation? How do we leverage AI as part of that business process to reduce the amount of toil, reduce the amount of low value effort, and still enable getting the job done? And I think that will continue to evolve. You'll see in the 2026 trends that we're calling out, some of those changes there. So data as a product. So more and more organizations, really the conversation was around how do we help you look at your data as an asset? How do we help you look at your data as a core, untapped resource that you have? And a lot of that is really in, some of the processes that our organizations are following, whether they're documented or undocumented, being able to leverage, business process automation to deliver success better there. Looking at data and alternative uses for that data, sharing data, finding public sources of data that can then be sort of tied into those processes. Also, with data as a product, it really became, working with organizations to create governance around data, looking at it as it is more valuable. And if it is more valuable, how are we building resiliency? How are we protecting it? If we're going to spend all this time in, curating this data, putting it in a data lake, moving it to where my AI tooling is at, or my AI workloads are at, how do I protect that? And so, treating it as a thing, not just sort of an unmanaged swamp of disparate bits of information was really critical. Also saw a lot of organizations start to create connectivity into structured data that maybe they hadn't thought about doing before. I know internally, we were looking at how do we pull in things like Salesforce data so that as we are working with AI tools, we're able to incorporate that data to make a better visualization of what I need to talk about with customers or what we're seeing with our cybersecurity study, and then better bring those insights forward. And the cybersecurity study, I think, is a good example of where we really were able to, through the last 10 years, build not only a snapshot in time of security, but really look at how security has changed over time. And I think that's really powerful when you start to couple that together with all the expertise of that team, because you get this wealth of experience, you get this great current snapshot of data, but you also have this data that goes back over a period of time. And so I think for us, that really became a product. And for me, personally, I was able to drive a lot of conversations with customers that started with cybersecurity, because more and more the cybersecurity lens doesn't just fall on security. It really falls on, it's really incorporated in all of the things that we're doing with technology. So data as a product, I don't feel that we made maybe as much progress in this space as I was hoping. Talking with customers, I still think we're really struggling with data governance, really struggling with tools to help us curate our data. and we still have data scattered a lot of different places, and so that becomes problematic. And knowing that there are tools out there, there are technologies out there that can help do this, some of that consolidation is key. But we have to have it identified as a goal of ours to really invest and commit and to resolving that problem before we get started. Um, Innovation at the edge. I think in some ways this started moving faster for some organizations that we talk to. For other organizations, again, it's still a bit of a struggle to get started with some of the innovation projects that we want to do, just because of technical debt and legacy ways of doing things. So I'm hoping as we move forward into 2026 that we'll continue to get more momentum in the innovation space, particularly, in the storefront, in the emergency rooms, in the manufacturing floor or on the manufacturing floor, in the energy generation plants, at the substations, et cetera. There's a lot of areas where we can really benefit from innovation. And I think that will continue to evolve into the new year as we start to look at some of our 2026 trends. And I'll get to those in a second. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Managing cross cloud, I feel like this is one that was I think we knew we had to sort of focus and view the hybrid cloud as, an infrastructure. More and more as I'm talking to some of our partners, as I'm talking to the CDW global team, as I'm talking to, our very large customers, it really is that workloads are going to exist where they exist. And there's attributes, whether it's the key attributes within our data centers, whether it's key attributes, on location at the edge, whether it's on the endpoint and the device, whether it's in the public cloud, whether it's in the SaaS provider. Those workloads need to be managed, and nobody seems to have the ability to hire completely separate teams to manage things completely independently. And so, more and more having conversations around, well, how do we, create more holistic management as opposed to, best of breed, point solution types of management tools. And so, yeah, this is one I think we made a lot of progress in. We had a lot of great conversations with customers. I think we moved the ball forward very, very well here. I think we're seeing a resurgence of some of these more traditional, in the data center products, and they're doing more in the public cloud. They've realized that they have to help their customers in the public cloud as well. And so I think we had this really good blending of um, workloads and capacity and storage and security tools, really spanning the hybrid infrastructure, which makes our job easier, as whether it's an administrator administrating across that, whether it's a manager that has to manage, multiple different teams that are working across those different infrastructures, whether it's a director making decisions on where to place those workloads, whether it's your executives that are trying to drive, innovation and value for your customers. Simplifying that has really, I think, helped. And I think we made a lot of progress there. Building business resiliency. I think, you look back 4, 5, 6 years ago, site reliability engineering was something that we were really just having, at the hyperscaler sort of level. And I think more and more, building that sort of SRE hat, that approach of how do we build value, how do we build resiliency, how do we avoid outages. Many organizations I think have moved past the DR. They're having business continuity discussions. They're doing tabletop exercises to discuss how do we recover quickly, how do we mitigate these challenges. And so I feel like this also was a trend where we had a lot of great conversations with customers, having a lot of good momentum on, building out infrastructure, building out services, having processes developed to mitigate outages or avoid outages, or at least minimize the impact and the reliancy of sort of single sourced services that could really drive, single points of failure across our organization. So again, I think we moved forward pretty well on this. Automating the skills gap. you still have a couple of sort of major players that work holistically across automation, whether it's configuration management or deployment management. We are seeing more tools for better control of containerized environments and Docker environments, which I think is critical. Definitely have had a lot of organizations looking at the way that they are managing their virtualized infrastructure, the way that they are managing their networks, the way they are managing across the hybrid cloud. And so I think automating the skills gap does go a lot hand in hand with that managing cross cloud. In organizations that we've talked to that have really invested heavily in automation and orchestration are really now reaping the benefits of that. And so I think this is one where I'd like to see us move faster. Internally, we've been able to go through and use automation orchestration, a lot of our managed services to drive value. Some of our large HPC deployments have been able to use automation as a way to really improve upon how we deliver for our customers and our clients. And I think, when I talk to customers, there's a lot of organizations that can still benefit from focusing in on automation, focusing in on helping teams manage through code as opposed to manage bespoke devices. But we are seeing more organizations really kind of get into this space. So I think that's a positive. So, overall in 2025, I think the ball definitely was moved forward. I think IT organizations are focused on a lot of the right things. Saw a little bit of a slowdown in some of the projects that maybe had an adverse effect on moving some of these trends forward. But realistically, we had these conversations across these 6 topics throughout 2025. I think our organizations move through these very well. And so I feel at the end of the year, pretty positive about these as the trending going into 2025. And I think that they will sort of inform us a bit on 2026. And so when we look at 2026 and the trends that we see going into the new year, I'll talk about those a little bit. But I think that in some cases are a bit of an evolution of 2025, and in others, I think that it's not that the ones that aren't included as carryover aren't important. It's just that I think there are other things that are popping up that are going to potentially be, even more pressing in 2026. So if there's something that didn't continue over, doesn't mean it's not important. It just means it relatively it might not be quite as important. So when we look at 2026, to kind of go through them quickly and then circle back on them in a little bit more detail. AI for business automation is the first one, and again, we know that AI is really transforming the way that organizations not only are planning, like doing their business, but also how it's starting to affect how they're planning to do their business. And I think the larger impact of AI will really come from when businesses start making decisions with AI already established and already as part of that, that process of transforming the business. Once some of the business has been transformed and AI is implemented in those processes and in that decision-making tree, I think that's where we'll see the larger impact there. But with AI, and if you think about the maturation process of AI, really focusing on AI for business transformation. And I kind of joke because I think, whether it's AI, whether it's zero trust, whether it's business transformation or digital transformation, there's certain, phrases that just kind of get the hair on the back of your neck to stand up. We're tired of hearing them. But at the end of the day, transformation of the business with new technology, for us is really nothing new. It's just that cycle of it being hype into becoming reality, where I think we get a bit of exhaustion hearing those terms. AI for business transformation, looking at your business processes, aligning tooling that can help automate or really optimize the way that we do those tasks can be critical. Whether it's automating or assisting the way we gather information, or the way we change information, or we take different modalities of information. some of the conversations over the year that I've had around transformation. Things like using computer vision to look at shipments. And as shipments arrive at your location, being able to create a dispatch list of where each of those different components needs to go. Very interesting use case. Something that for many organizations is being done manually, but now can be automated through camera technology and really optimize the way that the business can receive physical goods in one instance. Another one was, talking with one of our partners, was around identifying things like propane tanks in recycling materials. Obviously, if you are doing a metal recycling, you don't want to throw propane tanks into crushers or metal chippers or anything like that. And so, a lot of these automations, a lot of the use cases for AI being tied directly into the business, it can have safety and health implications. It can have direct line of business impact, which is where it's really powerful. So looking at AI for business automation, whether it's taking processes that are very difficult for people to do and leveraging things like computer vision to optimize that, whether it's things like natural language processing and being able to offer up information in multiple languages, or being able to change the modality of information, taking information that is visual through a camera feed and then interpreting that and allowing you to interact with that data using text. There's all sorts of really, really novel use cases. And I think that as we you know, take ourselves off of just chatbots as a way that we can use AI, and we start to explore, simulation. We start to explore, deep data evaluation and insights as we start to look at, maybe some of our tooling like computer vision. Those novel use cases that will really offer transformation opportunities will become more and more apparent, and we'll be moving faster on those types of solutions. Second one was really security governance and data readiness, and I think that as an output from organizations wanting to use their data more effectively, really governance and data readiness became two huge obstacles that organizations really had trouble sort of moving through and moving past. And so more and more we're having governance conversations around taking, say, the NIST AI data governance framework and helping customers apply that to their data flows and the way that they manage data, and finding tools and technologies that can help with data curation, making sure that you're using technologies that help with the locality of data, make it easier to have the data where you want to operate with it. So there's a lot of good tooling. There's a lot of good opportunity when it comes to getting that data ready. But it really does require that we focus in on it and we move it forward. And in a lot of ways, viewing your data as a product, identifying those critical data sets that you want to use to make the business smarter, faster, more agile, more nimble. That was sort of step one. Step two is, okay, great. Now what's the plan? How do we mitigate risk? How do I identify risky data? How do I go ahead and curate out bad data? Bad data from an analysis perspective is not just that you've got data that's inaccurate. It can actually bring down the overall effectiveness of the entire data set. So curating and pruning problematic data is going to be critical as we're trying to get more out of these data sets. And then security. So again, one of the things we've always traditionally most organizations have struggled with is things like data loss prevention, and DLP is a huge undertaking. There's a lot of process analysis. There's a lot of data analysis. There's a lot of time and tooling and investment that you have to make in order to really be successful with a DLP project. Um, and so, none of those challenges really go away in an AI powered business world. It just gives us another reason why we need to work through all of that. And there's some great tools that are leveraging very effectively AI capabilities to make those easier to take on. But it's still a load of work that needs to be done. And organizations are still using, RAG, retrieval augmented generation. They're still using a lot of API calls to structure data sets to pull data in with their AI tooling. But once we get through, securing our data, having a good governance plan, mitigating risky data, and then preparing that data, it really does unlock a lot of the value of, that we want to get from the business transformation supported by AI that we're after. The third trend going into 2026, and this is a little bit more uh, specialized, I think, for different verticals, is really industrial automation and robotics. Just a couple weeks back, really had the first publicly available world model. So not a large language model, but really more of a physics model for the creation of world objects. And that becomes very interesting, especially when we start talking about things like reinforcement learning, where we want to take robotics and we want to make it work in the real world more effectively, and being able to use simulation to drive that forward to make it more successful without having to take a million years to train. Being able to take a robot and sort of use the Matrix and Neo method of teaching it what physics are and how it needs to move, and how its movement changes, what's needed to move to the next location. All of that's pretty complex and takes a lot of time. But being able to leverage simulation, being able to leverage the advancements in AI to help train robotics faster is going to be key. And this was really reinforced with me with one of the conversations I had with a customer earlier this year, where we were talking about the energy generation plant that was being operated, and I was shocked at the number of people that were needed to support that plant. It was about 1/5 or 1/4 the number of people that I would have thought. And when I asked them, how are you able to support that large of a facility with so few people? The answer was industrial automation and robotics. And so when we think about kind of what I was saying about AI, when we're looking at heavy industry building, whether it's a new mine, whether it's a new processing facility, whether it's a new energy generation, whether it's a new hydro generation, a dam. Those plans are being built with industrial automation, with robotics in mind. And so it's greatly changing the end result and the number of people that are required, the number of manual labor that's needed to support those systems. Now, it does transfer a lot of the complexity into, obviously, networks of sensors and networks of robots, and it's not it doesn't remove all of the effort, but it does change the types of jobs that are needed, and the types of investment that are being made. So I think that's significant, and with those world models, hopefully more to be developed, the ability to build things digitally, to be able to do simulation, to be able to build digital twins that are allowing us to take and simulate even more of that environment, because very interesting. I mean, you think about if I'm doing city planning and I'm able to put in power lines in a simulated way. Well, how does that affect maybe wildlife and migration patterns, and what is the overall environmental impact or sustainability impact of doing things in a certain way? Well, if I have simulation that can be used highly effectively, and I feel that with a high degree of confidence I can trust the results of that, then all of a sudden it opens up this opportunity to create digitally, evaluate, and then build physically. And I think that's a really powerful tool for a lot of our planners and a lot of our architects to have in their back pocket. Fourth one is FinOps and tokenomics. And in 2025, we didn't talk a whole lot about, looking at finances. But as organizations have started to spend with AI, more and more of the conversation around FinOps and looking at our financials, in the public cloud, in the data center, at the edge, looking at our SaaS solutions as we've invested in AI tooling or AI addition to products. Those expenditures are now under more scrutiny. I think the most enterprises are not just spending on AI to spend on AI. They're expecting value back, and as they're looking at some of the costs of what they're spending, that's driving more scrutiny and more evaluation. And are we investing in the right thing? Are we approaching things in the right way? And then tokenomics is just the idea around if AI capacity, input and output is really based off of tokens. It really becomes: do I understand tokens? Do I understand the financial impact of tokens? With SaaS services, with my public cloud services, with my on premises resources, and am I really balancing my expenditures appropriately? In the public cloud, you don't have as much of a concern about over provisioning, so you're not necessarily wasting, but you are paying for what you use. And as you move from, say, more of a traditional foundation model into a reasoning model, sometimes the token increase can be 10x. And so you're asking the same questions, and you may be getting a better, thought out answer. But if it's costing you 10x what it did before, are you getting 10 times the value out of that answer? And so having those conversations and thinking about the way that we're using models, the way that we are, shipping data into those models, it's tokenizing them, the way it's taking those responses and creating the output tokens that we are then leveraging, that becomes more and more important. And I think in the new year, as organizations look to really, turn some of the maybe the loss leading approach to AI into more profits, or at least cut into the the money that's being spent to reduce that deficit. I think we will see potentially the increase of price on a number of these these SaaS services that we use. And I think if we're getting value, we won't mind spending that little bit extra, as those prices change. But if we're not getting value out of it, that's where, again, we're going to come back and we're going to reevaluate, and we're going to be saying, well, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing it in the right way, in the right place, with the right technology partners? And as a technology person, I was never really excited that we made decisions based on the finances. I always wanted to make sure we had the right technology for the solution, but we can't operate technology in a bubble. And so those finances and those costs, and from an AI perspective, the tokens and our plan for tokens and turning dollars into tokens into insights, we just have to have a game plan there. And step one is to understand that. So the fifth one is really around fraud, deepfake threats, and I think we saw recently, a hacking group leveraging Claude to build a fully automated pipeline of AI hacking against businesses. I think that's going to continue. I think AI is an enabler to prevent, to perpetrate more fraud. Is definitely it's on the rise. Also, as we've seen in our cybersecurity study, the effectiveness of our endpoint protection has dramatically increased, and that we're actually seeing a decrease of bad actors trying to compromise the endpoint, and they're going back to some of the tools that they would use before, looking at larger infrastructures, looking at SaaS providers where there's an aggregation of customers, and then looking at people as the link to go after. So fraud and then also deep fakes, whether it's deep fakes to social engineer some sort of an attack, or whether they're using deep fakes to compromise some of the security controls we put in place. MFA is great, but if MFA is using a biometric that can be faked, then that all of a sudden becomes a weak part of our security posture. And so looking at fraud, looking at the how those attacks are changing, how bad actors are leveraging AI as both a tool to make teams more effective, to make smaller teams be able to operate at the effectiveness of much larger teams, being able to be used to mitigate some of our security postures, whether that's being more effective at creating, emails that are easier to phish people with, whether that's being able to, fake out on biometrics and scanning or other ways. I'm also assuming that there's probably going to be some sort of a profiling tool that you can put in the profile, and it will guess passwords from your most commonly used password lists that might be valid. So just I think the number of attacks and obviously fraud being the way that a lot of bad actors are making their money, we're going to see that increase. And those organizations that are doing that in a systematic way are already taking advantage of AI, and so I think we see that continuing and growing, and so it's definitely something to pay attention to as 2026 continues. And the last one I have here is really sovereign services. So more and more the conversation, whether it's, Shared Services Canada, Government of Canada, whether it's, the Environment Canada, whether it's municipalities, whether it's the provincial governments, whether it's the, national governments and other countries and other nations, sovereign services and having, sovereignty at a number of different levels has become more and more critical, when it comes to, your data and the data that you want to protect and the intellectual property, and that you're really trying to build on top of. And so sovereign services have become much larger. We're seeing, a bit of a resurgence into interest in having, services run in a co-location or in a physical data center, not necessarily using publicly shared services and SaaS services where there is concerns about digital sovereignty around the data, around the applications that are being built, and I think it's a good thing. I think it creates when I look at technology services. And I look at the differences between being on premises or being in a co-location provider, or being in a public cloud provider, or being in a private cloud service, or being in a SaaS service. They all have different attributes, different pros and cons, and so I think where we are able to build a good spectrum of services and then leverage the right service in the right way, I think that's really important. So this refocusing on sovereign services and having workloads and data in a controlled place, I think is really important. And for example, with the Shared Services Canada RFI that went out, one of the big things that I was talking, I submitted in my response to them is that I think it's really important we start to create large certified data sets that are really vetted and available. And for example, I think what Environment Canada and I think what the global weather services do is really important when you think about how much of our day-to-day lives, how much of our travel plans is impacted by having good information about the weather. Currently I'm looking at flying out to visit our Vancouver folks, and there's weather service announcements going on about a snowstorm incoming. I mean, that type of information is really useful in a number of different ways. And so, having data that you can trust, having data that's been vetted and certified, and I think where those sovereign services and those sovereign data sets can be really powerful is opening those up for organizations to be able to then use that data, incorporate it into their systems, incorporate it into their workflows, and having that lineage and having that be a sovereign trusted source can really help speed up that process. So sovereign services, I think, more and more is going to be a conversation we have. I think it's going to be a driving force of why we are going to be potentially working with smaller private cloud providers. I think it's going to be a conversation piece we're having around, whether it's healthcare client data or student data at schools and universities. More and more, I think that's going to be driving some of our decision making. So when we look at 2026, just to kind of recap, AI for business automation, security governance and data readiness, industrial automation and robotics, FinOps and tokenomics, fraud and deepfake threats, and sovereign services are the top 6 technology trends going into 2026 that I'm planning to talk to customers about. And then as always, I look forward to getting some feedback. So if you've got me on LinkedIn or you are downloading this from Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you're looking at this on YouTube, drop a comment in the chat if maybe you've got a trend that you think is going to be really important going into 2026, or maybe you saw something in 2025 that I didn't really talk to. I'd love to hear that, and we can follow up with some more information there. But as always, I'm KJ Burke, Field CTO for Hybrid Infrastructure at CDW Canada, and this is the CDW Canada Tech Talks podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me on this. And subscribe to get the message out there. Definitely really appreciate people doing that. Continue, be safe over the holidays. Continue learning, growing, innovating, and hopefully some of these podcasts can help you with that process. So thank you, and be safe.